Imagine trying to build a house, but the blueprints change every single night.
Oh, that sounds like a nightmare.
Right. And to make it worse, your building materials aren't concrete and wood. You are trying to build with human emotions and, generational history, deeply held grievances, shifting loyalties.
Yeah, that sounds basically impossible.
It does. But that is exactly what it is like trying to build peace in a community that is fracturing. You're attempting to construct something invisible, but it still requires the precision of a master architect.
It is a completely different kind of engineering, for sure. When the materials are people, the structural integrity of your building relies entirely on trust.
Exactly.
And trust is, well, it's notoriously difficult to manufacture on demand.
Which brings us to our mission for today's deep dive. We are unpacking a truly fascinating source that looks at this exact challenge. We really want to know, how do young people move from being passive participants in their communities to actively designing lasting peace?
It's a huge question.
It really is. And to answer this, we're looking at a late night post by Sendy Doda. It actually details a presentation he gave at the MISHIP Youth Community Development Association Reboot 3.0 Unity Summit.
And that took place in Jos, Nigeria.
Yes, exactly. And he was representing Chief Maximus Yen, who brings, over a decade of experience in peace and security to the discussion.
And, what makes this document so compelling isn't just the local context, though that is incredibly rich. It is how this specific case study in the Miship chiefdom serves as this perfect microcosm for global sociological challenges.
Yeah.
The dynamics that data describes, they are playing out in boardrooms, city councils, and neighborhoods all over the world.
Which is exactly why you, listening right now, really need to pay attention to this. Whether you're, navigating toxic office politics or trying to organize a local neighborhood group or just trying to understand the dynamics in your own family, the challenge is universal.
Completely universal.
It's that agonizing transition from just talking about problems, what the source brilliantly calls talk shops, to actually doing the grassroots action.
Yeah, talk shops are a great starting point, but they aren't the architecture itself. If you actually want to build something that lasts, you have to deeply understand the ground you are building on. You can't pour a foundation without knowing the soil conditions.
Okay, let's unpack this. If peace is the building we're trying to construct, we first have to define what that ground is.
Right.
So the source relies on E.B. Tyler's definition of culture. It frames culture as this complex whole of knowledge, beliefs, morals, and customs.
So basically everything that makes up a society.
Exactly. So in our architecture metaphor, culture is like the operating system of a community.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, and when an incompatible file is introduced, what the source calls deviance, the system crashes. And that crash is conflict, where parties believe their interests are just totally incompatible.
What's fascinating here is how we define what happens next. When that system crashes and conflict erupts, the immediate human reaction is just to stop the violence.
Right, just put out the fire.
Exactly. But the source introduces Johan Galton's work to argue that simply stopping the violence isn't actually peace. Galton splits peace into two distinct categories. The first is what he calls negative peace.
Which, honestly, sounds like an oxymoron. How on earth can peace be negative?
I know, it sounds weird, but in this context, negative just means the absence of something. Negative peace is simply the absence of direct physical violence. The weapons are silenced.
The act of fighting has stopped.
Right, but that is the absolute bare minimum. It means you aren't actively destroying the building anymore, but it doesn't mean the building is livable.
So it's like putting a tarp over a gaping hole in your roof and saying, well, the rain isn't hitting my head right this second.
Exactly. The structural flaw is still entirely there.
A strong gust of wind and you are right back to disaster.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that brings us to Galton's second category, which is positive peace.
Okay.
Positive peace is the active presence of social justice and equity. It is the complete absence of what sociologists call structural violence.
And structural violence is, it's not physical weapons, right?
Right. Structural violence looks like systemic poverty or severe economic exclusion or, laws that discriminate against a specific group.
So positive peace means you actually fixed the roof, reinforced the walls, and made the house safe for everyone.
Yes. The Source beautifully connects this to St. Augustine, the ancient philosopher, who defined peace as tranquillitas ordinis, the tranquility of order.
The tranquility of order. Wow, I love that phrasing. It implies that peace isn't just quiet, it is a highly functioning system.
And it takes constant work to maintain.
Definitely. And to understand who is doing that work, this presentation specifically focuses on the youth. Just for context, Nigeria's 2009 National Youth Policy defines youth as anyone aged 18 to 35.
And in this framework, the youth are the primary builders. They are tasked with constructing this peace architecture.
And when we say architecture, we mean the physical spaces or overarching institutional frameworks that manage and coordinate peace, right?
Exactly. And their primary tool for this construction is dialogue. But dialogue here is not a debate.
No, it's not a talk shop where you just try to win an argument. The source is very clear about that. It's about building empathy and co-creating solutions.
Right. If we connect this to the bigger picture, we really need to look at how this theory actually manifests on the ground. We have these textbook definitions of culture and positive peace, but how does a living, breathing community actually do this?
Well, let's look at the Miship chiefdom as our case study. They have this deeply rich historical structure. You have the Long Miship at the pinnacle.
Supported by the district heads.
Yes, and then village heads managing the hyperlocal levels. Now, I'm going to push back on an assumption a lot of people make here. I think it's very easy to assume that traditional societies only used antiquated, rigid methods that never change.
Oh, that is a huge misconception. And the source completely dispels that. The Miship architecture is profoundly dynamic.
Yeah, it's a highly organized, evolving system of peace drivers.
There is this multi-generational continuity of leadership. The presentation highlights a literal relay race of youth leaders, passing the baton from the 1980s right up to 2024.
It's an incredible list. You have figures stepping up decade after decade, like Inda Hezekiah Gurumdi, Professor James Damon, Honorable Jesse Gershon.
Barrister Dakil Shamang, Mr. Theophilus Dawes.
Right through to modern leaders today, like Engineer Moses Zondet and Mr. MP Dash. It's an unbroken chain of action.
And what's really telling is how the peace drivers themselves have evolved. In the past, peace was maintained through physical, communal activities.
Like Wook, which is communal farming.
And Kwat, communal hunting.
Right, and they use seasonal gatherings like the Jang Dance to air out societal issues. Or the Jingla Duam, the festival of songs and initiation rites called Pun.
Think about the mechanics of those activities. When a community engages in Wook, communal farming, you are sweating next to your neighbor. Your harvest depends on them.
When you participate in Kwat, hunting, you have to implicitly trust the person beside you. These were never just cultural hobbies. They structurally engineered trust. But, you don't see a lot of people organizing a communal hunt to solve a contract dispute today.
No, the architecture has to look different now.
Exactly. So the modern drivers of peace have adapted. The source notes they now use digital dialogue via WhatsApp, Zoom, Facebook.
And on the social side, they use football matches, picnics, and intergenerational dialogue.
The medium has completely shifted from a traditional dance to a WhatsApp group chat, but the underlying purpose is the same.
Yes, it is still about structured communication.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because logically, we have all these modern tools. A WhatsApp message can connect hundreds of people instantly.
Right.
A Zoom call bridges geographic divides in seconds. So shouldn't maintaining that tranquility of order be easier now than ever?
You would think so.
But the source points out a massive paradox. Despite these tools, progress and development are actually slowing down. Why is that? What are the deeply human roadblocks here that technology just can't fix?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, a faster tool doesn't necessarily build a stronger house. Modern societal stressors are creating entirely new forms of deviance that those traditional structures weren't built to absorb.
Oh, wow.
The source dives into deeply rooted psychological and economic roadblocks. One of the most glaring is the psychological fear of losing control.
Yeah, the text explicitly mentions this phenomenon of neglecting the best among us to lead us.
Which is tragic, but it happens when current power structures feel threatened by visionary youth. They marginalize their most talented individuals to protect their own influence.
That just sabotages the whole architecture. And then the source also points to severe internal fractures like clannish squabbles, unresolved land disputes, and unhealthy inheritance division practices.
These are territorial issues that literally tear families apart from the inside.
The text highlights a local concept for this called Bet Takmu Khan, which means selfish interest. It's envy and betrayal.
Exactly. It's the me completely overriding the we.
And when you combine that selfish interest with severe economic exclusion, like mass youth unemployment, you get a breeding ground for structural violence. The text does not shy away from the ugly symptoms of this.
No, it lists some severe social challenges. Drug abuse and what it terms laziness and recidivism.
And it manifests in highly destructive ways. Yahoo, which is the local term for internet fraud. Hookup culture, cultism, armed robbery, and kidnapping for ransom.
You can see the disconnect, right? If youth are turning to kidnapping because they are economically locked out, you cannot solve that by just inviting them to a picnic or sending a Facebook invite.
Right. The operating system is actively being hijacked. So what does this all mean? We've diagnosed the severe cracks in the community's foundation. The ultimate goal of this deep dive is actionable solutions.
Yes, how do we fix it?
How does a community transition from just talking about these problems in workshops to actual grassroots solutions? Because global policies often feel completely disconnected from local realities.
They usually do.
Right. So how can an international framework actually solve localized issues like Yahoo or clannish land disputes in Jos?
This raises an important question, and it's the crux of Dowda's entire presentation, the difference between theoretical policy and domesticated action.
Domesticated action.
Yes. Dowda proposes taking the United Nations Local Youth, Peace and Security Plans, the YPS, and adapting them to the local context.
Okay, taking the global DNA but mutating it for the local mirship ecosystem.
Precisely. The UNYPS plan has 5 pillars, and if you weave them into the local community, you have a blueprint for positive peace.
Walk me through these 5 pillars.
The first pillar is participation. This means giving youth an unhindered voice in formal peace processes.
So fixing that issue of neglecting the best among us, you actually let them help design the solutions.
Exactly. The second pillar is protection. Before you can ask a youth to build peace, you must shield them from physical and digital violence.
That makes total sense. You can't ask someone to paint the walls while the house is on fire.
Right. The third is prevention. This is where we tackle the root causes. Why are they drawn to cybercrime? It's usually economic exclusion.
So you create viable economic opportunities.
Yes. Then the fourth pillar is partnerships. This is about building cross-generational alliances.
Pairing the digital fluency of the youth with the wisdom of the elders.
Exactly. And the final pillar, which is crucial, is disengagement and reintegration. You have to support youth who are trying to leave cultism, drugs, and armed groups to prevent recidivism.
You have to give them a path to return to the community.
Because if you just permanently label them as deviants, you guarantee they'll offend again.
Wow. When you weave them together, participation, protection, prevention, partnerships, and reintegration, it stops sounding like UN jargon. It becomes a highly practical manual.
It is intentional, localized design.
And stepping back, I think the biggest takeaway for you listening is that building a peace architecture isn't just for international diplomats.
Not at all.
Whether you are dealing with a fractured family, a divided workplace, or a community organization, moving from talk shops to positive peace requires structure. It requires addressing root causes and creating space for inclusive dialogue.
It really does. And I want to leave the listener with one final provocative thought to mull over based on the source.
Oh, please do.
We discussed the shift from traditional physical gatherings like the Jang Dance to digital dialogues on WhatsApp and Facebook.
Yeah, the evolution of the tools.
If modern technology connects us faster than ever, does it actually make the positive piece of social equity easier to achieve? Or does the digital world just create entirely new forms of structural violence and deviance that we haven't yet learned to architect against?
Oh, wow. That is a heavy question. Because whether you are pouring concrete or constructing human trust, your tools are only as good as the blueprint. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you next time.